So I guess from your perspective and experience and everything, what are the types of things that indie devs can work towards in terms of being a sustainable company? Because I think ultimately that's what everybody wants. That it's not necessarily about this dream of making a ton of money, because we all know that's very unlikely in most cases. It does happen, yes, but at the same time, like if everybody really loves this for what it is, and making games and having fun with it, and even a large variety of reasons, similar to those, like what are those steps and strides that people can take to have a sustainable living?
I think it kind of feeds on from what we were saying. You need to be, I think consistency is key across everything. And a big
Yeah.
part of that
Oh, I might have
branding
lost
is
you for a second.
consistent. So for the game, for your company. Oh,
Say that
should I
again.
start over?
No, just I
Yes.
got you at branding is consistent, keeping that consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it feeds into what we were discussing, that if you look amateur, people are going to dismiss you very early before they even look at your game. You could have the best game in the world, but if you don't present well, you immediately have a problem. So
Right.
you need to make sure that you have a plan for your branding and keep it consistent. Have strong visuals across your Steam page, your website, so that at a glance, people know what they're looking at and what they're looking for. And I think you need to be so consistent with that. That consistency is key. It needs to be ongoing. You need to update frequently. You need to help build that trust by showing people that you're putting the time and energy into cultivating your own space. Because I think that shows that you have respect for them even spending the time there. I think you need to make sure you're really consistent in communicating across those channels you've selected as your priorities for community building. So
Mm.
that might be creating a Discord server, and it's like, I'm going to spend 50% of the time really focusing on getting this server being active and, creating spaces for discussion, whether it's around our game, other games, however you want to approach it. It might be your Twitter, it might be your mailing list, it might be a combination, but just ensuring that with what limited time you have, you are reaching out to those people semi-frequently. Don't forget, I mean, if anyone's like me, they have a mind like a sieve, and they need to be, checked in with and reminded that this is something that you were interested in and that you were connected with, and how can we keep that relationship going? So be present, engage in the conversations your community's having, let them see that you as an individual and your team as a business care about the space as a whole that you're working in. So, congratulate, I really don't feel that we need to have a competition driven industry.
Mm.
At the end of the day, our games are so different most of the time, unless you are in a AAA and you're competing against very specific genres. There is space. So I think really signal blasting other teams that are doing really cool, interesting work, and creating these conversations around that means that you can sort of share those communities as well, which is really, really positive.
Yeah, totally.
I think in terms of future,
Hmm.
the number one thing, and this is for present and for future, is have a business plan. And not just a marketing plan, have a business plan. You have to keep reassessing it. I think to survive as an indie, you have to understand business and understand where you fit within your market. You can't make a cool game and hope people love it. Like we've said, if people don't know about it, it doesn't matter. But you need to know what your business's branding is as well, because if you make a title and then move on to another one, how are you going to bring that audience from the first game across to the second if they don't care about the concept? So I think this is where a lot of indies fail. They don't necessarily explore and discuss and understand the realities of maintaining the business of games. And what that leads to is they lack process or procedure. They don't create a business plan and set target dates and a timeline. Their dev cycles blow out, their scopes blow out, and then they run out of money, unfortunately. So it really does need to be the forefront at all times, and it needs to be in discussion, constantly being reassessed, constantly being improved against what the market is doing, against what your team's strengths are, and against whatever challenges you're facing.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point because I think, I mean, with anybody, just especially with someone starting out, and that's kind of relative. I mean, just starting out can be meaning your first game, your third game. I mean, there's a lot of things that could come down to, but as you're saying, like coming down to the process and everything, having that business plan not only defined, but to know that you can completely change everything. Kind of a quick story analogy here. Instagram, I found this out from one of the many podcasts that I listened to. They started out as being a whiskey review app, I believe. And so that's all that Instagram was. They were people posting pictures about their whiskey that they consume. And what really got that app to take off was the fact that they could apply the different filters to the pictures of their whiskey. And because so many people were into that, then they, changed their model around and everything. And then they became Instagram. And I'm sure you could still find whiskey pictures on Instagram, but nowhere near to the extent that they originally planned. So it just goes to show. And I think another company that everybody's pretty familiar with is Netflix. I don't remember this exact story, but basically, I think they changed their business model and plan like numerous times. And it just goes to show that just because you have a plan in place doesn't mean it shouldn't change. And in fact, in a lot of cases, it probably needs to, because there's just so many things that are constantly changing that you're trying to like pin down. And the reality is you're never going to really pin down everything. You have to be really adaptable. So I think the points that you make there, just constantly reassessing, looking at your process, how can you make it better? How can you change it? Because as you grow as a company, those types of things are always going to be changing. The environment's going to be changing, and you just have to be adaptable. So I think how you laid it out there is just perfect. And hopefully those analogies and stories kind of like give people a different idea as exactly like how that can change in a higher level, so to speak.
Definitely.
All right, we talked about a lot, but it was a lot of good stuff. But I'm just trying to like now like take this all in. So from everything you mentioned, if you were to take away, let's say like just 5 key points that would help indie devs, what would they be and why?
Number one, engage the support of other people around you and consulting companies. If you're not sure how to do something, don't torture yourself trying to work it out. Pretty much, I would say every studio in Melbourne and some internationally would have a DM from me on Twitter being like, hey, how do I do this thing? And it's such valuable experience and wisdom that people have across the industry that they are so willing to share with you. So make sure you aren't afraid to ask for it. It's a positive thing. And with consulting companies, for example, we have a company called Loom Consulting in Melbourne, which is run by a fantastic group of people that will give marketing support and advice that can help those people who are really unsure about the side of business that they really don't understand, and help them to draft a plan that they can then execute. So very important. 2, constantly research, constantly update your business plan and approach. There is no room to be inflexible in games. Everything is changing, everything is moving. And just as you have to be flexible with your development process and cutting things when you need to and adding things when you need to, you definitely need to do the same with your business plan. So give it the space and time it needs. 3, pick your targeted channels, work out what they are, and focus on consistency. But make sure you're assessing your value versus your time. If you're, for example, for a while we looked at Instagram and sunk a bit of time into Instagram, but the amount of time it took to create these posts and try and start these conversations, the platform just wasn't right. So we knew that we were much better off sinking that time into something like Twitter, where we're going to get a lot more value. So make sure you are taking stock of where you're at in terms of your marketing channels.
I am going to say real quick too.
Go for it.
That I'm glad you brought that up too, because when we were talking about like, marketing channels and things like that, That was one thing I was going to ask you too, is because a lot of times people will think like, oh, I should do this, this, that, and the other thing. And that example was perfect because basically you're like, hey, look, we tried this out. It was Instagram. Didn't work out. It wasn't worth their time. And there's no need to keep that running if you weren't getting your return on investment. And a lot of times too, return on investment isn't just money. It's also your time and how you value your time and other things that need to be done. So thank you for doing that because I completely spaced it and didn't ask that question, but you nailed it right there. So thanks.
But exactly, I think I like to sort of recommend when people are asking about it, pick three, and prioritize 1, 2, 3. So have one that you have the majority of your time on and is your main focus space that if you direct someone to it, they're going to get a really wide breadth of your business. And then the other two are your supplemental and supportive channels. And, that could be a Discord, a Twitter, and a Facebook. It could be a website and a Facebook and an Instagram. It totally depends on your business. And that applies across any business, not just games.
Right. I couldn't agree more.
Another thing I
Perfect.
think is, it's so important. Number 4, I think, would be find the funding works for you and learn how to ask for it. I think, people are really worried about, people want to seem successful and they don't want to, it can be really hard to ask for money, even from a funding body, if you know that it potentially will take money from someone else. And we have a huge issue with imposter syndrome in this industry and people saying, my game's not really worth it. And, I shouldn't really, and, they're not going to give it to me anyway. To learn what is important and unique about your game and trust in that and build your pitches around that and learn how to ask for help. People are willing to give it. You just have to ask them. I think that's a hard lesson to learn, but the sooner you learn it, the better you set yourself up for success.
I'm glad you said that too, in terms of like how to ask for it, because I think asking, just in general, asking for anything, regardless of what it is for whatever reason and I'm speaking more from an American culture here, and I don't know if there's a difference, but I think as like people, as a society as a whole, asking for anything is really different, no matter where you're from, right? Or difficult. And it's funny because, geez, I get a lot of stuff from podcasts, but there was another thing that that someone was saying, like in terms of like asking, it's like they kind of want to. I guess it's appropriate to say it's a social experiment, but basically they said, hey, go out to a Starbucks or any coffee shop, whatever, and go in there and ask for a discount. Now, typically you're like, well, a place like Starbucks or any coffee shop, they're not going to give you a discount, but they're like, just ask for it. And in a lot of cases, people didn't get a discount. No big surprise. But it wasn't necessarily to promote or to try to get people to get a discount on the coffee they were getting. It was more so of putting people in that process of in experiencing what it's like to ask for something, especially when they felt like it wasn't warranted or it wasn't needed. And I even took the initiative to do it myself too. And it's funny because I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do this, no problem, whatever. I get in line and then all of a sudden I start getting a little nervous. I'm like, why? I'm just simply asking a simple question for a discount. And what's the worst that could come out of it? They say no. In my instance, it was this person looking at me and like goes, why? And then I was like, just cause. I didn't want to give away the answer too quickly. And he's like, no, we can't do that. And he started giving me all these details about it. And I was like, hey, look, the reason why I was really asking is because it was kind of a social experiment. I explained it to him and he's like, oh, wow, that's really cool. So sorry, I digress a little bit, but the point is I thought it was really good that you mentioned that and just going over like how important it is to learn how to ask for things, because yes, it is really difficult. No matter how simple the task, like I alluded with the asking for a discount of coffee, it still creates a little bit of, I think, stress and other things that we generally don't like. But if you learn that the end result, you're better off asking than not, then it's really important to learn to ask for those things. So thank you for bringing that up.
Definitely. And a lot of the time, the end result is human connection, which we really can undervalue at times. There's a fantastic TED Talk by Amanda Palmer. She's a lead singer of a band, and it's literally called The Art of Art. and she talks about her time as a busker
What was that
and
again? The
what
art
it
of
was
what?
like.